to talk to you guys today a little bit about the process that I go through making wooden flutes. I've showed you a couple of videos recently on some flute making projects, and it's something that I've really been enjoying. Making the wooden flutes is special to me just because I've always enjoyed working with wood. This is the elderwood flute that I showed in my most recent video that's up now, made from a piece of elderberry bush that I took right out of the yard here, and made a very nice flute out of it. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about how I go about doing that. This is a piece of elder branch, elder wood here. As you can see, the center of this is really soft naturally, so it helps get a bore started. If you needed to bore this out, I still bore it out with a drill, but this helps you get started, and it kind of has a natural path through the center of the branch already. For a smaller flute with a thinner branch, you could almost just take that part out and still make a flute out of it, and it's not very difficult to do. The nice thing about the bamboo flutes and the PVC flutes that I've made is you don't have to worry about the center bore. You just gotta work on the sound holes and fingering holes, and you're good to go. This is a piece of elder wood that I cut green and let dry out for a while. It still has a little bit of the bark skin kind of on it. So I'm going to sand on this for a few minutes and then clean it up and come back and show you the next steps to making a wooden flute. Here we are, been sanding on this elderberry that I showed you a few minutes ago. This center bore is a natural bore that I mentioned, but it was quite a bit off center, and I had like probably 1/4 of an inch on almost 2/3 of the piece of wood here. It's not perfectly in the center now, but I've sanded it and tried to get it as round as possible overall, and a little bit more consistent wall thickness, so it's probably about as close as I'm going to get it. It's almost as smooth as a piece of bamboo right now. I use 80 grit sandpaper to take it down where I need to take it down, and then I finish off with a 220 to get it as smooth as I can. The next step is going to be to start making the sound holes and the air hole. Ready to start making some holes here. This flute is not a very big center bore, so I've marked it at 3 inches and 2.5 inches. I'm sorry, it might be more than that, 3 and 2. And then my plug would be centered right at 2.5 inches. I may end up having to trim a bit off the end of this flute, so I didn't want to come in too far from the end, but we'll see how it works out. I use a burning tool for wooden and bamboo flutes to make these holes. This is a burning tool that I made out of an old dulled out masonry bit that I had, so I just grinded it down on the end, or filed it down to make it round and a little bit of a point on the end, and made a handle for it. And I'll heat this up on the end and use it to punch a hole right through the flute. This one's a little bit big for this particular flute. I have some smaller ones that I made out of some smaller steel rod that I had around, so I'll probably start with these and then see where we need to go as far as the size of the holes. I have to make the surface where the fetish is going to sit flat on top of the wood, so I'll usually do that with a file, possibly a chisel, but once I'm to this stage, probably a file to keep from any possible damage I could do to the flute. This is the actual heating of the burning tool, so I can make those first couple of holes. And I'll try to hold this camera good enough where you can actually see what I'm doing, but I really need both hands, so I'm not sure how this is going to work out. I know it's not going to make it very good with one hand. I use this angle tool in the sound hole to try and burn a taper on the inside of the flute from that end edge of the sound hole should be a sharp edge that tapers down inside the flute. So now we have an air hole and a sound hole. This hole is tapered to a much sharper edge. Next step is going to be to flatten this top out a little bit, and that'll sharpen this edge up even a little bit more. And then we'll have to get a plug inside right between these two holes. That'll stop the air as it comes in the end of the flute, push it up through this hole, and then a small channel in the fetish will compress the air and push it across this edge of the sound hole. So, I'll be back. So you can see here I made a bit of a flat surface at the air hole and sound hole. Still have to get a plug right in between. This is a temporary fetish, block, bird, whatever you want to call it. I kind of keep this at the workbench and use it. You can see there's a small channel chiseled in the bottom of it. Filed it out to try to make it as smooth as possible. It still needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but I've used this one over and over just when I'm working. So as you can see, that fits right on top. The channel is far enough back to let the air from the air hole hit the bottom of the block, and it's forced out of the tiny channel in the front right there and comes across the sound hole. So I'm going to get a plug in there and see if this thing makes a note. So I'm working with a dowel right now to make a plug for this, but the easiest way to plug flutes, bamboo, PVC, all of them really, is to use cork. You can buy a little pack of corks in assorted sizes. You can save wine bottle corks. It works great on a 3/4 inch PVC. I don't happen to have one handy today, so I'm going to use a wooden dowel and try to make a plug for this one, and we'll see how it plays. So here's a piece of wooden dowel I've been working down by hand to try to get it the right size to fit in the end of the flute. The problem with using a hardwood dowel like this is that it doesn't flex at all, which is why the cork is so good, but I've got it down to just about the right size. I only need a little piece, about a 1/2 inch maybe at the most. And as you can see, this fits in the end of here fairly well. The problem is it needs to be airtight, so you need to get it in there pretty snug, but if you put a piece in that's too big and you got to force it in there, you run the risk of splitting the flute. So anyway, not the best method, but at least you get the idea. So here we go. I managed to get that plug in there right where I wanted it. I'm sure you can't see that, it's black in there. But I got the plug right here between the two holes, exactly where we needed it to be. Fits in there nice and snug. So now we're going to see if this thing makes a note. This is the fetish, or bird, or block. It fits right on top, as you can see. And let's see what happens. This thing is actually playing a note now. And it's just below a G. G, but it's a little bit flat. So there you go. Elderberry branch, a couple of holes, a plug, and a fetish, and we got a flute. Here we are. So what I found after working with this flute for a few minutes is that it really wanted to be a much shorter flute than what we started out with. I mentioned it was playing a G. After fixing the fetish on the flute and trying to play it a little bit, it was struggling to sing. So I worked with it a little bit longer and figured out that it wanted to be a shorter flute, and it plays a beautiful C note now. So we'll continue working on it, get some fingering holes on it, but the flute is much happier being a shorter flute. So here we are. I used the online calculator, entered in the bore size, the wall thickness, and the starting note, and it gives me a measurement from this end where to place each hole. It's actually a calculator for a 6-hole flute, but a lot of people would have 6-hole flutes and then they just keep this 4th hole covered all the time. So I just skip it rather than having it covered, especially on a high-pitched flute like this one. My fingers are so big, it would be so close together here between if I had to do all 3 of these holes. So I just skip that hole on a lot of my flutes that are 5-hole flutes, and then it plays a pentatonic scale, so with the low do and high do being at either end. So here it is. I redid the fetish from the little block that we had and carved this little bird-shaped fetish, so it looks a little bit more like a traditional Native American flute. And there it is. So this is the highest one I've made so far, but here we go. So there you have it. Start out with a piece of elderberry branch, elder wood from the yard, cleaned it up, sanded it down, cleaned out the bore, made the air hole and sound hole to get it to make a note, and then put the fingering holes, and there you have it, a Native American flute, handcrafted. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please check back and visit my blog, www.thesoulfan.com. Thanks a lot.